Houston, Texas, was the home of Sandra and Jim Melgar, who had been married for over 30 years and resided in a peaceful neighborhood on Kelsey Meadows Court. Jim Melgar, originally from Guatemala, had moved to the United States at the age of 3 when his family chose to settle in Houston, where Sandra and her family lived. The couple met in school, with Sandra recalling Jim as funny and charming, always cracking bad jokes and acting silly. After weeks of him asking her out, she finally agreed to go ice skating with him, and they said the rest was history. They married in 1980, with Jim working as a computer programmer and Sandra running a medical billing and coding business. Both were successful but led a low-key lifestyle according to their friends. The couple had one daughter, Elizabeth, who went by Liz, and she described the three of them as incredibly close, saying her parents were best friends and perfectly suited for each other. The three of them were big travelers and enjoyed things like hiking and fishing, but their love of outdoor activities sadly became a distant memory. Sandra suffered a lot physically with various conditions. She had lupus, epilepsy, hypothyroidism, and she had had hip replacements. Liz said she also saw her mother have violent seizures on many occasions, which was terrifying for the whole family. Jim was desperate to help his wife and spent whole days researching her conditions, trying to find treatments and cures. One of Sandra's friends said there were times that she didn't feel safe driving. She was afraid her seizures might come on, so she depended on him for a lot of day-to-day activities. On December 22, 2012, Jim and Sandra were out and about. Not only was Christmas just around the corner, the couple had recently celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary and decided that today was the day to celebrate. They went out for dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. At around 9:30 p.m., Jim picked up some drink mixes at CVS, and sometime after, the couple arrived home. They made their drinks and snacks and spent some time in the jacuzzi in their bathroom. They talked about what they wanted to do with their future, whether they would sell their home or not, and whether they would hopefully travel one day. Jim was just 5 months away from retirement and was keen to make lots of plans to fill up his time. They also spoke about the following day. Jim's family were coming over for a small party to celebrate their anniversary and catch up before Christmas. Sandra recalled that suddenly the couple's 4 dogs started barking, so Jim got up to go and see what was going on. After about 15 minutes, he still wasn't back, but the dogs seemed quieter, so she decided to get out and start getting ready for bed, heading for the closet next to the bathroom. December 23, 2012, 7 a.m. One of the Melgar's neighbors noticed that the couple's garage door was open, which instantly struck him as odd. It didn't close all day, and no one went in or came out that anyone could see. At about 4:30 p.m., Jim's family arrived at the house for dinner. Herman, Jim's brother, knocked on the door, but was met with silence. Jim's black truck was parked in the driveway. As the garage door was still open, he could see Sandra's silver car parked inside. He went through the garage and entered the house that way, unlocking the front door for everyone else. Inside, they called out for Sandra and Jim, but it was painfully quiet. Herman said all the blinds were still closed. The house felt stuffy, and there was a strange heaviness to it. The couple's dogs then started barking, and Herman's daughter turned to her dad and said, "Something doesn't feel right." The family tentatively started making their way through the home, calling out as they went. Suddenly, Herman heard Sandra's muffled voice coming from upstairs. He ran up and through the master bedroom and the bathroom that tagged onto it. Near the jacuzzi was a small walk-in closet. In front of the closet door was a chair which was propped up under the handle. When he moved the chair and opened the door, he saw Sandra lying on the floor inside the closet, her arms and feet bound by 2 scarves. Herman tried for a minute to untie her before running to get scissors because the knots were too tight. He then discovered his brother Jim in another closet tagging on to the master bedroom about 30 feet away from where Sandra was found. He was naked, badly beaten, and had been stabbed many times. Blood covered the walls and furniture. His legs had been tied with a telephone cord and a rope was loosely wrapped around his chest. Just before 5 p.m., authorities were on scene, but just 2 minutes after they arrived, 52-year-old Jim Melgar was pronounced dead. He had more than 50 injuries in total and was covered in defensive wounds on his hands and arms, including 31 knife wounds. His skull had been bludgeoned too. An expert said that his defensive wounds showed he had attempted to fight off his attacker rather than run away. Through tears, Sandra told the paramedic that she last remembered it being about 1 a.m., and after that her mind was totally blank. She said she had no idea that 15 hours had passed, but as she had woken up with soiled underwear, she knew it must have been a significant period of time. As authorities started moving through the home, which was now a major crime scene, they saw that drawers had been pulled open, Jewelry boxes had been gone through, and there was a wallet and a purse out and on the bed. Sandra and Jim's daughter, Liz, said there were prescription pills missing and a TV from one of the bedrooms. Despite the state of the home and what she said, nothing was listed as missing or stolen in the police reports. Inside the jacuzzi was a white blouse and a kitchen knife they determined to be the murder weapon. Police also found Jim's loaded gun in the closet where he had been found, and the couple's safe, which was still locked, but had blood on the handle. Sandra said that her head was pounding and her body was aching as if she had had a seizure, a feeling she said she knew all too well. She was checked over, but they found no signs of her head being hit. They couldn't find any significant marks or abrasions to her arms or hands either, something the police found a little odd given how tight the knots were and how long she would have been tied up. She was taken to the hospital for further checks but quickly discharged herself, and after this she was taken to the Harris County Sheriff's Office to answer some questions. It was a very odd scene, and police suspected that something was off about Sandra's version of events. She said she had no idea what happened past getting out of the jacuzzi and couldn't remember a thing. She said she definitely didn't see or hear anything happen to Jim and had no idea that he had been killed. She told police that she had headed into her closet, started applying some lotion, and then completely blacked out, putting it down to either hitting her head or being struck by someone. An unknown amount of time later she came around and realized she was bound. She called for help and then must have passed out again after having what she thought was an epileptic seizure. She said the reason she felt this was because her body felt the same way it always did after having one. She said the only thing that had been odd about that day was as they were driving home just hours before, a car they didn't recognize looked like it was trailing them. But investigators were still dubious about her story. They couldn't understand how she hadn't seen or heard anything, especially given how violent the scene was and how loud Jim likely would have been. He was fighting off whoever the attacker or attackers were for a while, given his defensive wounds, and this could not have been quiet. They also couldn't fathom why someone would kill Jim, but leave her alive and virtually unscathed with just a few bruises and small scratches. It was such a different scene in both closets. None of the neighbors reported hearing a commotion or the dogs barking either. There was nothing out of the ordinary to them. One neighbor was even outside working in his garage until 1 a.m. and said he didn't hear or see anything suspicious near the house or on the street. No noise, no cars, no dogs, nothing. He was surprised that a home invasion had actually happened right under his nose, especially while feeling he was more of a target. To be honest, if anybody was gonna get robbed it would probably be me because the garage door was wide open. I'm there. It was just me messing with my stuff. If somebody were gonna come down and try and rob somebody, they'd be like, "Look at that dude. Let's just go in there, tie him up and take all his stuff," he said. Officers said that there were no signs of a forced entry and the drawers inside looked like they had been neatly pulled out, emptied and placed around, as opposed to someone opening them in a hurry and hunting for valuables. They found it odd that the murder weapon was left at the scene in the jacuzzi, the murder weapon that had come from inside the Melgar's kitchen. They also thought that she could have very easily pulled the chair against the door using a bath mat or a pillowcase. And they noted that neither Jim nor Sandra had any ligature marks, something they would have expected to see. This indicated to them that Jim had been tied up after death as opposed to being restrained before being killed. Despite the fact that things were missing, according to Liz and Sandra, authorities and experts' overall conclusion was that the evidence was inconsistent with a home invasion and the scene had been staged by Sandra. They asked if she would take a voluntary polygraph test, which she declined. She said that she was freezing cold and shaking and was worried that this would work against her. Detectives had made their mind up about what had happened that night, and on December 24th, they called the Harris County District Attorney's Office requesting to file murder charges against Sandra Melgar. But the DA's office declined, saying there was a lack of evidence. Testing from the scene was starting to come back, and it showed there was no blood apart from Jim's present, which was unusual. But an expert said they could not exclude the possibility of someone leaving the home essentially clean. There were male and female DNA profiles discovered on some door handles, dresser drawers, the handle to the safe, and the scarves that had been tied around Sandra. These profiles did not match any members of the Melgar family, but they weren't fully tested to determine who the DNA was linked to. Detectives then received a message from Liz saying she had found a backpack with an Xbox in it in the garage. She said the only explanation for this was someone had bagged it up to steal it and then dropped it or left it on the way out. An unknown female DNA profile came back on this as well. A few days later, someone called in with a tip, saying after thinking about that night long and hard, they had recalled something. They said they had seen a man acting strangely around the neighborhood that night. It turned out that this man was Chad Sullivan, a convicted thief who was just out of prison on assault charges. Although police knocked on his door twice to talk to him and left a card asking him to get in contact, he never responded, never opened the door, and thus he was never questioned. A few weeks later, Sandra said her memory was finally starting to come back in bits and pieces, and she had a flashback to a young Hispanic woman in the closet talking to someone behind her that Sandra couldn't see. But investigators were still not convinced. They carried on building their case against Sandra over the next 18 months, believing that it just didn't add up, didn't make sense, and didn't seem plausible for this to have been a robbery gone wrong. In the summer of 2014, almost 2 years after Jim was killed, Sandra Melgar was indicted on first-degree murder charges. Her defense team argued that there was no physical evidence against her and that everyone was missing a very key part. There was simply no motive at all. They said, this idea that something must have happened and then she went crazy and subjected him to over 50 blunt force and sharp force injuries is just impossible. They maintained that someone or several people broke into the house via the back door to rob her, and Jim ended up dead in the process. They questioned why Sandra was found with none of Jim's blood on her. If the attack had been as violent as it was, surely she would have something on her. But her hands and nails were clean and her nails were unbroken. She also had no injuries aside from some bruising on her upper arms, something they said they would have expected to see a lot more of given the crime. They also pointed out Sandra's various physical ailments and said there was no way she could have physically overpowered him in the first place and gotten away unscathed. And the fact that there was an unknown male and female DNA found in the house that was not fully tested should be enough to create doubt for the jury. And if there was anything that put doubt in the jury's minds that someone else could have done this, they couldn't find Sandra being guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Finally, her defense team pointed out that the lead investigator on the case was later forced to resign after backdating a search warrant in an unrelated murder case. It was purely a badly put together circumstantial case in their eyes. But the prosecutors said her story just didn't make the slightest bit of sense and put forward two motives for murder. They said that she had wanted a divorce, but due to them both being Jehovah's Witnesses, she was worried she would be pushed out if she went ahead with this. But Sandra's family and friends said she never made any mention of wanting to separate from her husband. The second motive pointed to the $250,000 life insurance policy that Jim had, which Sandra would have benefited from. They claimed that it was entirely possible that Sandra had tied Jim up before he was stabbed, perhaps positioning it as some sort of sex game, or she stabbed and bludgeoned him before he was tied up. Hence the reason the knots were only loose as they weren't needed to actually restrain him. She then spent time staging the scene, finishing with tying her hands and feet. They said that one of her nails was slightly cloudy, which pointed to a cleanup happening. Celestina Rossi, a blood spatter analyst and crime scene reconstructionist, testified for the prosecution. She said that, in her experience, the crime scene didn't match that of a home invasion. There were no signs of a forced entry and dresser drawers weren't scattered throughout the bedroom. She also said that the candle on Jim's nightstand was still lit, and this was a sign that there was no struggle near the closet where Jim was killed, as would likely be expected in these type of situations. She agreed with the medical examiner's report that all of Jim's wounds were defensive and noted that his gun was still loaded and untouched, just inches away from his body. She said as it was his wife that was attacking him, he would be keen to disarm her rather than kill her in self-defense. And the chair blocking the door from the outside, the prosecution along with police argued it was entirely possible for her to put a pillowcase under the chair to pull it against the door and shut herself in. This was not something that needed to be done by someone else. In August 2017, a jury spent 8 hours deliberating. On the first day they were split down the middle in their decisions. But on the second day they had reached a verdict. Sandra Melgar was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison for the murder of her husband Jim. Liz said an audible gasp went through the entire courtroom as the verdict was read out. Sandra almost passed out and sat sobbing. She said that the thought of her mother killing her father had briefly crossed her mind, but she no longer thought this was possible, and no one in court thought she would have actually been found guilty. Both Jim and Sandra's families support her claims of innocence and believe her story completely. I try to look at the evidence. I try to be unbiased about it, which is difficult because these are my parents. In the end, I still want justice for my dad. I want to know who did this, and it was not my mother. I know that she did not do this. I'm going to continue to fight until we can prove that, Liz said. The prosecution were happy with the result and the sentence given and said, she told a story that didn't make sense. It didn't add up, and the jury didn't believe it. The jury foreman would later say, a couple of months later, Sandra's team filed an appeal requesting a retrial. This was denied. In 2018, famed defense attorney Kathleen Zellner announced she would be taking the case to help Sandra, believing in her innocence. Kathleen Zellner has helped exonerate 19 people who were wrongfully convicted and garnered major attention from the Netflix series Making a Murderer when she started working with Stephen Avery after he was convicted of the 2005 murder of Teresa Horbuck. Another appeal for Sandra was lodged, but this was denied again, with one of the judges saying, "The evidence is legally sufficient to support every essential element of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt." In late 2022, the Innocence Project of Texas announced that they too would be picking up Sandra's case. She has spoken from prison and tells the same story she always has. It is a really strange, confusing, and sad case, which has been divisive right from the beginning. Many believe that Sandra is a killer who masterminded the whole operation and staged the scene to get away with murder, whereas many others believe she is just as much of a victim. The police decided that it was her from the get-go. They created the narrative, and the killer or killers are still out there. With numerous groups, podcasts, and websites campaigning for her release, and with others fighting to keep her in, it's clear to see just how polarizing this case and conviction has been. Whatever anyone's thoughts are, there are still so many unanswered questions about that night. Is the real killer behind bars, or has someone been wrongfully convicted? Sandra Malaga will be eligible for parole in 2031. If she is not granted parole, her release date is August 2044. She will be 85 years old. Jim Melgar was a kind, hardworking, and thoughtful man with a great sense of humor and a big heart. He is missed dearly by everyone, and with so many questions about what happened still lingering, family and friends say it only becomes harder to find closure when that was already so tough to get in the first place. Brandon Gonsalves, a 22-year-old living in Goragayan West, a growing suburb in Mumbai City, shared his home with his mother, Seema, and older sister, Kakma. On the morning of December 19, 2016, as was his routine, Gonsalves left for a walk from his home to Ari Colony. Typically, he would return within an hour, but on this day he didn't come back until afternoon. Worried, Seema and Kakma tried contacting his friends, as Gonsalves had left his phone at home. Despite their efforts, no one had any information about him. As night fell, concern grew, prompting Seema and Kakma to visit the nearby Dindosi police station to file a missing person report. The police joined Gonsalves' family and friends in their search, distributing his photo to nearby stations. Then, on December 22nd, around 12:30 p.m., a call was received at the nearby Ari police station. The caller reported discovering a headless body. Police immediately rushed to the scene in Ari Colony, where the sight they encountered left them shocked. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes, and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Ari police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonsalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonsalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindosi police. So now the Ari police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonsalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonsalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonsalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonsalves' mother, Seema, and elder sister, Kakma, were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Seema saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonsalves' post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonsalves' tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonsalves so brutally that even the small spine is fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonsalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, It was found that Gonzalez's death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonzalez was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonzalez was murdered 3 days before his body was found between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonzalez didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonzalez's body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonzalez's body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonzalez's body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder if there's not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Goncalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship in glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Goncalves might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Ari colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonsalve leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. O'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonsalve left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then a little further from Gonsalvez's house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage with 2 people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonsalves slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonsalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver. But the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than 2 people in the car. And unfortunately, the day Gonsalves' body was found, the 2 CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonsalves was abducted on December 19th in the same car, and then murdered elsewhere with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Ari Colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case because the police chucked 70+ CCTV cameras in this entire case. But none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the air colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Gora game. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Gora game and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonsalves' killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonsalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonsalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonsalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonsalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonsalves rarely talked to anyone except for his family or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonsalves' room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Don Salve's house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonsalves' dog, the startling thing was that Gonsalves' dog went straight to where Gonsalves' body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonsalves' body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest. Like how Gonsalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonsalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Gonsalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Gonsalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, padukas, etc. Because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonsalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonsalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonsalves' mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son, Brandon Gonsalves' murder case. During this time, Gonsalves' mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonsalves' murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter, with this Brandon Gonsalves case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021 around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Aleka, 27, and Sedivya, 22, have both passed away. But there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kalayug is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend Dr. Naidu, "Everything is normal at home. Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kalyug and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alakija. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale, and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Sedivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife, Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police were having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale, because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madanapalli, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it. But seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police, because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, They too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead. So how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Naidu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something. But for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house nor has anyone gone inside. Not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid who told them that 3 days ago she was told by the Naidus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alkia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social Alikia's dead body was a book by the spiritual guru, Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Shri Sai Baba, Meher Baba and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alkia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post, she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Naidu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nadanapalli. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Mastermind's IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Aleksh, 27, was a postgraduate from Phopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Saidivya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rama Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alikia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alikia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmarja struck Alikia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alakia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudo's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter. And if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmajaja scolded her husband Dr. Nayudu a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this. And it was revealed from a psychiatrist source that their entire was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alikia and Saidivya are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alikia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alikia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Naidu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Saidivya and Dr. Purushottam Naidu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, Perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Friends, how did you like this combined cases? Case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. Very little is known about his family and upbringing. He never got married and didn't have any children. Strong worked at a local gas station and also as a security guard on a movie set. People who knew him described him as eccentric and arrogant, believing he was smarter than others. He enjoyed arguing and trying to prove his point until others agreed, but he wasn't typically aggressive. On September 11, 2017, a fisherman in Oshawa, Ontario, made a disturbing discovery in the city harbor. He found a badly disfigured and decomposed human torso floating in the water. The fisherman immediately reported his finding to the police, who retrieved the remains and sent them to forensics for analysis. Due to the body's severe decomposition, experts had a hard time identifying it. The torso was missing limbs and a head, and its internal organs were gone. The only clues about the victim were that she was a young woman between 18 and 25 years old. Her fingerprints, dental records, and distinguishing features couldn't be used for identification. A partial tattoo on her neck was visible, but its design was impossible to determine due to decomposition. As a result, a DNA analysis was the only remaining option, but no matches were found in the existing database. The police then began investigating cases of young women who had gone missing in recent months. In November 2017, nearly 2 months after the discovery, authorities identified the body as 18-year-old Rory Hatch, a high school student who had vanished in mid-August. She was several weeks pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Divers searched the harbor and nearby Lake Ontario shoreline, but no other body parts were found. The time and cause of death remained unknown. Experts examined the body and found numerous severe injuries inflicted while Rory was still alive, suggesting she had been tortured over a long period before her death. This discovery led to a major breakthrough in the investigation. For months later, an unexpected twist emerged. In December, the Wood family moved into a house at 19 Macmillan Drive, Oshawa, where they noticed an unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, 45-year-old Adam Strong, assured them it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix soon. The neighbor tried to be friendly and polite, but there was something unsettling about him. When David's wife tried to welcome him with homemade cookies, he refused to let her enter his apartment, instead stepping out into the hallway and quickly closing the door behind him. In that brief moment, she caught a glimpse of his living space, which was in disarray, and was overwhelmed by the foul smell inside. Adam took the cookies, thanked the neighbor, and quickly excused himself. Later, when they crossed paths in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that he was about to start renovations and his apartment was not presentable at the time. Despite his polite demeanor, he seemed visibly nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore the unbearable smell. However, on December 29th, they finally called a plumber to investigate a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. Although the issue seemed minor and easily solvable, the discovery the workers made in the pipes was shocking, even to experienced forensic experts. Human body parts had been found. Sean Fenn, a plumber, and his partner were called to the Wood family's apartment to fix a clogged refrigerator drain. However, when they arrived, they were met with an overwhelming stench, which they soon discovered was coming from the apartment below, belonging to Adam Strong. Upon entering Strong's apartment, the smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Sean, an experienced plumber, had never encountered anything so foul-smelling in his career. While working to clear the pipe, Strong's behavior became increasingly strange and nervous. He refused to leave the area, constantly asking questions about the process. The plumbers tried to ignore Strong's antics, but what they discovered next would be shocking. As they extracted the blockage, they found over 10 kilograms of entangled flesh, hair, and bone fragments, including disfigured human fingers. Strong remained surprisingly calm, asking how the remains ended up in the pipe. Fenn immediately called the police, suspecting they had stumbled upon human remains in the pipes. When the police arrived, they confirmed the discovery of human flesh. Instead of denying the allegations, Strong calmly admitted that Rory Hatch's body parts were stuck in the pipe, with additional remains stored in his freezer. A search of the freezer revealed a severed head, limb fragments, and more, all packed in plastic bags. The apartment was in disarray, with dirty dishes, rotting food, trash, and empty pizza boxes littering the floor. The police also found numerous adult magazines with sadistic content, as well as intimate toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and devices for binding and hanging, suggesting a disturbing atmosphere. Adam's social media profiles openly displayed his interest in BDSM practices, with explicit photos and videos. Although he didn't have a long-term partner, several former partners accused him of being abusive, leading to their breakups. He wrote reviews of adult films and magazines, indicating he spent most of his free time consuming such content. Behind his calm exterior, he led a secretive life. The police cordoned off Adam's residence, treating it as a crime scene. The initial investigation suggested that they had a lot of work ahead, with potential discoveries that could be just as shocking as the head found in the refrigerator. Notably, the evidence found led investigators to suspect that the discovered body parts belonged to Rory Hatch, whose torso was found in a water body 4 months earlier. A distinctive tattoo on the neck and DNA analysis supported this theory. In Adam's house, investigators found disturbing evidence of a gruesome crime. Hidden among piles of trash were the blood-stained clothes and shoes of Rory Hatch, later confirmed to be the missing schoolgirl. The bedroom, where her bed was found, was covered in her blood, with splatters on the walls, furniture, and ceiling. A dissection table was found in the kitchen, suggesting that the suspect had dismembered and gutted the girl there. The entire area was contaminated with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments. The bathroom was equally appalling, with dirt, blood, and signs of brutal acts everywhere. It appeared that Adam had attempted to dispose of the body by flushing it down the toilet in parts. But when this failed, he tried to fix the blockage himself. A large collection of sharp weapons was also found in the house, likely used to dismember the girl's body. Rory Hatch was born in 1999 to a single mother, Shannon Dion. Despite her father's absence, Rory grew up in a loving environment, thanks to her mother and grandmother. Her family had a unique background, with her maternal grandfather founding a motorcycle club and being a skilled boxer with ties to the criminal underworld. Rory had a peaceful and carefree childhood, excelled in dance, and was an award-winning student. At 13, she received an award as the best cadet of the year in her local army unit. However, her life took a dramatic turn at 15 when she got introduced to drugs by a friend and became dependent. She began associating with questionable individuals, neglected her studies, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, Rory's family tried to get her help for her addiction, but she would relapse every time. At 17, she ran away from home and turned to prostitution to support her drug habit. Then, her mother got her into a specialized program for teenagers with addictions, which forced her into treatment. This time, the efforts paid off and Rory was able to get back on track. She got a job, studied remotely, and eventually earned her high school diploma. She started planning for college and began a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony. In June 2017, Rory told her mother that she was pregnant and planned to keep the baby. However, Rory's mother didn't know that her daughter had started using drugs again. Rory met with Constable Christopher Crane at a shopping center in mid-August. He had been monitoring her for 18 months to keep her away from negative influences. During their meeting, Rory confessed that she had started using drugs again and lost her job a month prior, often exchanging sexual favors for money or drugs. Constable Crane was deeply disturbed by her revelation and promised to help. He stepped away to make an urgent call to arrange for her hospitalization. However, when he returned, Rory was gone, and the constable was unable to find her. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her incoherent due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue and stepped out for about an hour. When they returned, they were shocked to discover that Rory had vanished. And sadly, she was never seen alive again. A review of hospital surveillance footage showed that Rory simply got up and left the hospital on her own. Her family reported her missing the next day, but despite an extensive search effort and widespread social media attention, no one was able to find her. It's likely that her addiction led her to seek out drugs at Strong's house, where she may have exchanged sexual favors for them. After Adam alerted the police to the location of the remaining body parts, an investigation was launched. Investigators expected him to cooperate, but instead, he became unresponsive and refused to answer questions at the police station. He remained calm and denied any wrongdoing. Because there was no direct evidence linking him to the girl's murder, Adam was only charged with desecrating a body. His lawyer's efforts to secure bail were unsuccessful, and he was held in jail awaiting trial. The investigators struggled to find an effective approach to questioning him, trying to elicit an emotional response that might provoke a confession. Strong was evasive when questioned about Rory's presence in his house and what he did to her, but openly discussed his fondness for bladed weapons and extensive knife collection. A thorough search of Adam's house uncovered a dirty hunting knife with dried skin fragments that appeared human in a hidden closet. Although the DNA from the knife didn't match Rory's, it belonged to another individual. It took several months to identify the owner of the DNA, but by July 2018, it was established that the traces on the weapon belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, a woman who had vanished about 10 years prior. Candace Fitzpatrick shared similarities with Rory. Both struggled with substance abuse and legal issues, grew up in troubled families, and had a history of running away from home for months at a time. To survive, she would live with acquaintances and exchange sex for food and drugs. Born in 1989, Candace was 18 when she disappeared. Her family didn't notice her absence initially and only reported her missing almost 2 years later, by which time all leads had gone cold. Candace's life and social circle led many to believe she could have ended up anywhere. Her parents thought she had run away and held on to the hope that she would return. However, in 2018, the news from law enforcement crushed their hopes of ever seeing their daughter alive again. It's worth noting that both victims of the suspect were the same age and looked almost identical, like sisters. This led people to believe that the police had caught a serial predator. When questioned about the second woman, the suspect unexpectedly agreed to cooperate in exchange for better living conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet access, and specific meals. Law enforcement officials were outraged by his demands, but they relented to get the information. Adam began his story by talking about his difficult childhood, including how he was abused by his stepfather from the age of 5. He also described how he started torturing and killing animals from the age of 7, finding physical pleasure in these acts. When the conversation turned to Rory, Adam Strong described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in it, but claiming he only did so because she had died from an overdose. However, the police did not believe him, and he was unable to convince them of his story. When questioned about Candace, who had disappeared 10 years prior, Strong was surprised the police knew about her. He tried to find out how they had discovered his secret, and when told about human flesh stuck to an old knife, he became somber and regretful for not taking better precautions to cover his tracks. Strong admitted to meeting Candace but denied killing her. However, the evidence gathered did not support his claim. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he inadvertently incriminated himself. The police informed him that Rory was pregnant at the time of her death, which Strong vehemently denied. The detectives realized that Strong would argue endlessly to prove his point, so they decided to provoke him into revealing more than he intended. They insisted that the victim was pregnant, and Strong, trying to prove otherwise, described in detail how he had examined Rory's reproductive organs and felt a pulsation, leading the police to believe that she might have still been alive during the attack. Later, Strong tried to deny everything, but his statements had been recorded on camera and were presented in court. He refused to disclose what he had done with Candace's body, and her remains were never found. The detectives were unable to learn about any other possible victims. During one of the last interrogations, Strong callously stated that he would like his condolences to be passed on to Rory's parents. At the trial, his lawyers argued that Strong was mentally ill and unable to be held responsible for his actions. However, a psychiatric evaluation determined that despite certain disorders, Strong was aware of his actions and could be held legally accountable. The trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace's disappearance. Strong was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted his guilt, the evidence and his confessions left no doubt about his involvement in the heinous crimes. 4 of Strong's former partners also testified, describing his cruelty and violent tendencies. According to the prosecution, Strong had lured both women to his home, promising them money for intimate services, and then killed them. Adam Strong brutally murdered his victim, subjecting her to a prolonged and agonizing ordeal. He likely killed her out of fear that she would report him to the authorities. On September 4th, his mobile phone signal was detected near the city harbor, where he had dumped the victim's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was convicted of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hatch, as well as desecrating Hatch's remains. He received a life sentence without parole. However, Strong showed no remorse, stating in his final remarks that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months into his sentence, Strong unexpectedly revealed the location of his first victim's remains. The police followed his directions, and after several months of searching, they discovered human bones. DNA testing confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, which was officially announced. Investigators believe that there may be additional victims in the Adam Strong case, possibly including at least one more woman. Notably, when Strong was initially arrested, his personal belongings were confiscated, including a chain with 3 rings. He later requested the items return, stating that the rings held sentimental value. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their dead daughters. However, the 3rd ring remains unidentified, sparking speculation about potential additional victims. On March 3, 2022, around 9 p.m., Corey Richins and her husband, Eric, were celebrating her recent purchase of a new property for her real estate business. During the evening, around 11 p.m., Corey made Eric a nightcap, his favorite, a Moscow Mule. This vodka-based drink is known for its strong notes of mint, lime, and ginger beer. Keep that detail in mind, it will be important later. Corey brought the drink to their bedroom, where Eric began sipping it in bed. The couple had been working on their marriage after a challenging period, and Corey had shared with friends that things were improving. Together, they had 3 sons and lived in Camas, Utah, a town that offers a rural lifestyle with spacious properties. Situated roughly 40 miles east of Salt Lake City, their home provided them with a luxurious life filled with amenities and comfort. After giving Eric his drink, Corey claimed she went to bed shortly afterward. However, before she could fall asleep, one of her sons awoke her after a nightmare. She stated she stayed with him to soothe him back to sleep, eventually falling asleep there as well. She stated that she woke in the middle of the night around 3 a.m. before returning to her bed. There, she found her husband slumped on the floor at the end of the bed. She touched his foot and found it cold to the touch. She claimed that she got her phone that she had left plugged in on her side of the bed and called 911. She then started to perform CPR. First responders arrived attempting to revive Eric, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. This is the story that Corey Richins told police when they interviewed her. The autopsy would show a different story. When the toxicology report came back, it revealed that Eric Richins died from a fentanyl overdose that was 5 times the lethal dose. The medical examiner reported that the fentanyl had been orally ingested, which was noted as unusual. Law enforcement interviewed Corey. In the interview, the detective would inform Corey about the fentanyl overdose. In the interview, Corey was adamant that her husband didn't do drugs. The detective conducting the interview would also say that they were starting to look at how the drug got into his system and that they would need to search the house for all electronics. During the interview, they also seized Corey's cell phone, which she had just brought. Here are some snippets of the transcription from that interview. Corey Richins, he doesn't do drugs. Detective Woody, we're gonna go check the house. We want to make sure there's nothing there because this is super dangerous. It's dangerous for you. It's dangerous for your kids. Later in the interview, Detective Woody, it's kind of odd that there was nothing there that we saw. You know, I don't know if you were trying to clean it up so he wouldn't get in trouble or this didn't get out. So we also have warrants for all electronics so that in case you ordered anything on the phone if you tried to keep us Corey Richins, is it cut crack? Like it's Detective Woody, it's fentanyl, that it's a pretty deadly drug. It's something that's not, it's becoming more common. Then the interview ends with them leaving with Corey to go search the house. Police would start to investigate the death as suspicious, possibly a homicide. Not every overdose would be suspicious, but Eric was not known to have a drug problem, and everyone who knew Eric knew that he loved his family very much, and he had every intention to stay a part of that family. The family home was searched, and the electronics, including Corey's phone, were taken into evidence. But who is Eric Richins? Eric was born on May 13, 1982. He was 39 when he died. He reportedly was an excellent outdoorsman, hunting, and worked on his family cattle farm. He was the oldest with 2 younger sisters. When he was younger, he worked and learned about working on the ranch, tending to cattle and horses, hauling hay, and feeding the animals, but he also had a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah in International Studies with a minor in Spanish. He learned Spanish during a 2-year mission with his church to Mexico. He owned a successful high-end masonry business specializing in high-end projects. He owned the company with his friend Cody Wright. Corey and Eric met while Corey worked at Home Depot as a front counter person. They got married in 2013 in a backyard wedding at the home they shared and welcomed 3 sons, aged 10, 9, and 6 today. Eric was a coach or assistant coach on all of his son's sports teams. He was known to be very involved and dedicated to the teams that he worked with. Corey was Eric's second wife. He'd been previously married to Julie Jorgensen, whom he married in 2005. There's not much information about this marriage, but they divorced in 2009, and Julie passed away in 2011. Eric and Corey signed a pretty tight prenup agreement, which stated that Corey wouldn't get any of Eric's assets in the event of divorce. She would only inherit his estate in the event of his death. From the outside, it appeared that they had a great marriage and a successful life to the outside world. They had a massive home worth $1,100,000 and everything they could want or need. In 2019, Corey started her company, K. Richards Realty LLC, where she was a real estate agent, and according to her company, she would buy and flip homes. Future findings would show that she was constantly losing money with this venture. Financial records would begin to paint a picture of just how unsuccessful Corey was with money. After Eric's death, it would come out that Eric had talked to his family about wanting a divorce, but he planned to stay in the marriage for the kids. Some reports said that Corey had stated that Eric was having an affair, and that she had moved out some of his clothes, but that they had gone to counseling, and things have been well before his death. However, the media and court documents began to paint a different story. It showed that in September 2020, Eric discovered that his wife had racked up a substantial amount of debt with her business, and that she had been stealing from him to pay for it. She had stolen excess of $200,000 and charged more than $30,000 to his private credit cards. He also discovered that she had fraudulently borrowed $250,000 using a forged power of attorney. The fraudulent power of attorney had been dated and signed in 2013, but not notarized until 2018. She had also taken money that had been set aside to pay his business taxes. The amount that Corey stole seemed to be never-ending, but ultimately she promised to repay the stolen money back from the accounts. In November 2020, Eric had also decided to put the house and all of his assets into a living trust that his sister, Katie Rickon Benson, is the trustee for, and she was also made the representative for the estate of Eric Rickens. It is believed that Eric did this because he felt he could no longer trust his wife. Eric and his business partner had life insurance policies out in each other's names, which is standard practice just so that the other can buy out the estate of the other partner if anything were to happen. It was discovered that in January 2022, Corey changed the beneficiary to herself on Eric's policy. It was something that he discovered and quickly changed it back. Shortly after this incident on Valentine's Day, Eric got violently sick from eating and would express fears to a friend that he thought his wife might be to blame. It is also believed that Corey had 2 life insurance policies taken out in Eric's name without his knowledge, one from 2014 and one from January 2022. The policies where Corey was a sole beneficiary. She had all the information sent to a P.O. box that Eric nor his estate knew about. After his death, she filed death claims on both of these policies and received $1,500,000 directly benefiting from the death of her husband. After Eric's death, Corey would go on living her life, some would think extravagantly. She took her kids on trips and kept living life as usual, but with more money in the bank. Almost a year to the day of Eric's death, on March 7, 2023, Corey published a book called Are You With Me? It was a children's book about a boy who had lost his father and could feel his presence afterward. Covers topics on feeling if someone is with you after they die. A few weeks after the book's release, she was on a local morning news show in Salt Lake City to promote the book. She had seemed cold and disconnected, but she credits her son in helping her write the book with her. She said that it was written to help them understand that her husband is with them even if he wasn't there. She wrote it as a comfort to her sons and others experiencing the loss of a loved one. She dedicated the book to her husband, saying, quote, "To my amazing husband and wonderful father." The book is no longer available on Amazon. On May 8, 2023, Corey was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and 3 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. The following is the prosecution and the state of Eric Rickens' belief of the events that led to his death and after. On May 2, 2023, the police interviewed a woman only disclosed as CL. At this time, her full name is being held for privacy. She's a known acquaintance of Corey Rickens, who had previously cleaned her house and some of the properties Corey was flipping. CL is also known to have past charges of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. She's not been charged with anything at this time. Between December 2021 and February 2022, Corey reached out repeatedly to CL. Once was asking if she could get pain meds for an investor with back pain. CL contacted an acquaintance known as Acquaintance 1, who got in contact with a dealer known as Acquaintance 2, and was able to procure hydrocodone pills for Corey, which Corey paid for by leaving money for Seal at a house that she owned at the time. 2 weeks later, Corey asked Seal to get something more potent like, quote, that Michael Jackson stuff. She then asked for fentanyl. Seal then contacted the dealer again on February 11, 2022 and got 15 to 30 pills that Corey paid $900 for. She picked them up at Seal's house. There are 2 reports of what happened on Valentine's Day 2022. In one document, Eric ate a sandwich that Corey had left on the seat of his truck with a love note. After eating it, Eric immediately got hives and had difficulty breathing. The other account, which is the arrest warrant, said that Corey and Eric were having dinner at their home when Eric got very ill after dinner and believed that he'd been poisoned. In both of these options, it was reported that Eric contacted a friend and said he believed his wife was trying to poison him. There's no evidence that Eric acted against his wife on this belief. Almost 2 weeks after Valentine's Day, on February 26, 2022, Corey contacted Seal again, asking for another $900 of fentanyl, which Seal procured and left in a fire pit at another house connected to Corey. 6 days later, Eric Ritten died of a fentanyl overdose. Another piece of evidence was that on the night that Eric died, Corey had stated that she left her phone in the bedroom when she went to sleep with her son. However, the data on her phone showed that it was open and moved multiple times between 10:30 p.m. and 3:20 a.m., including at 3 o'clock and 8 seconds p.m. when the phone was moved more than 250 feet. An expert at Corey's bail hearing stated that it could have been a device connected to the phone that caused the pings. For example, a smartwatch. There was also evidence that Corey had messaged someone several times during the time she was supposed to be sleeping. Those text messages had been deleted and never recovered. It is also stated that the person who received the messages had also deleted them. That person's name has been kept out of the media and court records. Corey also said in her original statement that she had performed CPR on her husband. Still, when EMS arrived and started to perform CPR, Eric began to foam at the mouth, which was an indicator that no one had tried to perform CPR previously. Corey later texted her best friend saying, quote, "I pumped so damn hard, so hard," screaming at him to come back to life. After Corey's first phone was taken into evidence, she got a new phone which was later taken into evidence. This phone had some disturbing web searches in its history, which included, can you delete everything in an iCloud account? Can you delete text messages to be retrieved from an iPhone? Can cops uncover deleted messages iPhone? How to permanently delete information from an iPhone remotely? Can cops force you to do a lie detector test? What are you allowed inside Utah jails? Will life insurance pay if death certificate says pending? Luxury prisons for the rich in America. If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on a death certificate as? FBI analysis of electronics in an investigation. Can FBI find deleted messages? What does FBI do with electronics for searches? Can the cause of death be changed on the death certificate? What is considered a lethal dose of fentanyl? Before being arrested, investigators had asked Corey if she'd taken any vacations. She responded in an email, quote, "You asked about any exotic vacations I have taken since Eric's passing. I went on 2 trips last year. 1, my kids tried out for a soccer camp in Salt Lake City to qualify to play in Spain in June, and both my kids made it. So yes, I took them to Spain in October 2022. I've attached their invitation letters." Another message read, quote, "I took my kids and my mom came with us in August of 2022 to Mexico. As I hope you understand, the months prior to this since Eric's death have been hard to deal with." She also went on to talk about how she and Eric went to Mexico every year and that they hadn't gone this year because Eric went on a hunting trip in January instead. On June 12, 2023, Corey Richins had her bail hearing. She could be seen in a white blouse and dress pants and handcuffed in the courtroom. She had been wiping her eyes with no visible tears and seemed sad while evidence was given, and she was held without bail and awaiting trial. Eric's sister, Amy, gave this impact statement.
Dear Judge Mrazek, I'm here today to represent my brother, Eric Eugene Richins, whose life was taken in a senseless act of poisoning on March 3rd, 2022. His wife, the defendant, has been accused of committing this crime. If she is found guilty, she has committed the ultimate act of betrayal. Eric is gone, and I am brokenhearted. He was my best friend and protector. The feeling of loss is so great it is visceral. And with the sorrow comes a wave of panic at not being able to see him again. I can never talk to him, never hug him again, and never more be a part of his life. Eric's world revolved around his family, his love for hunting, the family cattle ranch, and his intense drive as a successful entrepreneur. Being born into the Richens legacy shaped Eric's formative years and resulted in a lifetime of hard work, dedication, and fierce loyalty. At an early age, Eric learned the joys of keeping horses and cows around. He spent countless hours helping our dad work the ranch, hauling hay, feeding the animals, and mending fences. He loved our family unconditionally and was a devoted son, brother, uncle, and father. Eric was a family man who always strove to be the absolute best father and husband. He was an attentive and loving father to his 3 sons and a devoted husband to his wife of almost 9 years, Corey, the defendant. Eric did absolutely everything in his power to provide his family and his 3 sons with every possible opportunity to learn, grow, and have fun. He was the coach or assistant coach on all his boys' teams, which included soccer, basketball, and baseball. He spent countless hours coaching and teaching the boys to play aggressive and give it their all. Eric truly cared about every single child he coached and wanted the absolute best for all of them. There was never a dull moment when you were around Eric, whether it was him showing up to a family dinner with no socks or the sleeves torn off of his shirt because he had to make an emergency bathroom stop along the way, or his calling to tell you he rolled the 4-wheeler for the upteenth time is stuck and he needs you to come get him. It was never boring. Eric loved to have fun and always wanted to make sure everyone else did as well. He owned almost every motorized toy possible, from 4-wheelers and side-by-sides to trucks and snowmobiles, and was so excited to share those with his sons. He had the perfect combination of business sense and foresight. He built a very successful masonry business from the ground up and helped many friends do the same. He had a special ability to build close relationships with everyone he worked with, which really allowed his business to thrive. Eric loved every aspect of his job, but most of all, he loved the people he worked for and those he worked with. Eric faithfully supported organizations that he truly believed in. He never was one that wanted recognition or accolades. He did most things anonymously and without recognition. Eric was a true champion of all people. It did not matter if you were an employee, friend, family, or the next random person walking down the street. If you needed anything, you could count on him. He truly cared about each person he met. Eric loved fully, laughed loudly, and lived life with reckless abandon. He enjoyed great adventures to far-off places, but also cherished the small and finer things in life. No obstacle was too great for Eric. He simply viewed each one as a challenge. No peak was too high, and the next adventure was always just around the next bend. Words cannot describe the loneliness and loss that is felt in every heart that was lucky enough to know him. Eric was such an inspiration and role model for us all. His loss has created a Grand Canyon-sized hole in this community. Except instead of taking millions of years to slowly form, our worlds change overnight. His 3 boys' entire worlds and their perspectives on life changed. None of our lives will ever be the same. Eric died under horrendous circumstances. I am tormented at the thought of what he endured. I play it out in my mind. I go through the terrible sequence of events. I wonder when he realized he was in mortal danger. I wonder what Corey may have said to him in his last moments. How long was he conscious, knowing he would die? Where were Eric's boys when all this happened? Did they hear Eric's body fall to the ground? Did they catch a glimpse of their father taking his last breath? It's torture to think of. Why did Eric lose his life? Why did the boys lose their father? Was it because of Corey's greed and desire to get life insurance and other assets? If so, that is abhorrent. How could anyone value human life so cheaply? I cannot comprehend it. I'm overflowing with grief and pain at the thought that Eric meant so little to her. If Eric had died because of an illness, he would have been cared for. He could have looked after him and been with him. If he had died because of an accident, people would have tried to help. There would have been kindness. But there's no comfort to be had here. There's no consoling thought in the way Eric died. In his last moments, after being intentionally poisoned, he was faced with betrayal and terror. The thought of it is unbearable. I am haunted by the horror of it. This last year has been a living hell for our family. We have watched as Corey has paraded around portraying herself as a grieving widow and victim while trying to profit from the death of my brother. Both by trying to profit from a book about his death and trying to get life insurance and assets that should go exactly where Eric wanted them to his boys. Immediately after Eric was killed, Corey told us she could not help us get anything ready for the funeral as she was too distraught with grief. We shortly found out that was not true at all. In fact, she pulled herself together enough to go close on the purchase of a $2 million home, hire a real estate agent, hire an architect to create CAD drawings of the home, hire a lawyer in order to file a lawsuit on Eric's trust, hire a locksmith to come break into and clean out my brother's safe, and attempt to have Eric cremated. She mustered up the strength and resolve to do most of this within 48 hours of his death. Corey assaulted me. I will never forget the look in her eyes when she attacked me that Sunday morning. It was early and had been snowing most of the night. I was just getting ready to leave and heading out to the car when I saw a locksmith in Eric's detached garage starting to drill out his gun safe. I asked Corey multiple times why we could not just call my dad for the code. I could not understand why she was breaking into and ruining Eric's safe. To this, she screamed at me at the top of her lungs, called me some inappropriate things I cannot share with you here, and then told me to get out of her house. It was then that I told her that she could not kick me out of my brother's house. My sister Katie was now the executor of Eric's trust and estate, and just like Eric, she would not want the defendant breaking into his gun safe. Corey looked at me with pure hatred and rage. I was messing up her plan. I was getting in her way, and because of that, she attacked me. She punched me in the face and neck multiple times. It took 4 people to pull her off me that day. Before the funeral, Corey opened a bank account and asked everyone that was grieving to send her money instead of sending the family cards and flowers. It was not even 2 weeks after Eric's passing that we were told she had taken down all but one photo of my brother and removed all his clothing from the house. Corey put together a golf tournament in Eric's name 2 months after his death on what would have been his 40th birthday and told his family, all of us, that we were not allowed to attend. Since Eric's death, it has come to our attention that Corey took out multiple life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge. It appears that she forged his signature on various documents, assigned herself as Eric's durable power of attorney, inappropriately diverted money from his business to herself, and assigned herself as beneficiary of Eric's portion of our mother's retirement account. I should also not forget to mention the multiple life insurances she has taken out on the boys. Her most recent business venture was authoring a children's book about how to help grieving children cope with the loss of the death of a parent. In this book, she had the audacity to use the boys' real names and even use their last family portrait. Her behavior gives me great concern, as she has exploited the boys for money and will likely do so again. In addition, Corey has weaponized Eric's children, manipulating my dad to do or not do things by threatening to cut him out of their lives if he did not capitulate to her demands. She similarly deprived the boys of contact with myself, my sister, and her daughters, unless we agreed to give her the money in Eric's trust. Money that Eric wanted to go to his 3 children. As if that were not enough, I have been told that Corey started telling their 3 little boys that none of Eric's family or friends loved them. She apparently told them none of us cared for them or wanted to be around them, even though that is the exact opposite of what was happening. We all want nothing more than to be there for those 3 little boys, my nephews, yet Corey has made sure to cut us out of every aspect of their lives. This is all just a brief summary and the start of what our family has been through over the last year. We have scarcely gone a day without finding out some new allegations or evidence regarding something Corey appears to have maliciously done to attack and undermine my brother, his 3 little boys, and our family. We have all been there since the beginning of Corey's and Eric's relationship. I was there on one of their first dates. We were there at the wedding. We were there when each of the boys were born. We have been there for every birthday party, school graduation, and rodeo. We welcomed her into our family and treated her as one of us. Not only did she betray our brother, it feels as though she has murdered and taken away a part of our souls as well. Because of her actions, there has not been a day that has gone by we have not lived with paralyzing anxiety and fear, worrying for the boys' lives as well as our own. I may be naive, but I never knew evil like this existed. If Corey was in fact willing to kill Eric for money, who's to say that what she will not do, who would be next? Corey was in a desperate financial situation when Eric was killed, and that situation seems even worse now. We understand that she has defaulted on loans and is already a defendant in other lawsuits based on her financial misdeeds. I am truly concerned that she will stop at nothing to dig her way out of the problems, including murder. She seems devoid of moral sensibility, and there is no telling what she will do if she is released. Judge Mrazek, her fate lies in your hands. Please do not allow Corey to use the fraudulent life insurance proceeds to get out on bail. That would be morally reprehensible. Please do not allow Corey to take advantage and make a mockery of our justice and legal system anymore. She has done enough. Please do not allow Corey to hurt Eric's memory, our family, friends, and community anymore. We have been through enough. Please do not give Corey the opportunity to hurt Eric's 3 boys anymore. They have lost enough and have been through enough. Since Eric's death, we have learned and unfortunately are continually reminded that Corey is desperate, greedy, and extremely manipulative. If she gets out on bail, I will be afraid not only for my own life and those of all of my family, but most importantly for the lives of Eric's 3 sons. Our family has already suffered enough. Please do not let Corey out on bail where she will be a risk to do further harm. Please protect what Eric put his life on the line for, his 3 boys.
In June, Corey filed a lawsuit, suing the estate of Eric Richins for $2 million and the house that they shared. Eric bought the house in 2012 before they got married without Corey and never added her name to the house. He had also added the house to his living trust in 2020. Also on June 27, 2023, Eric's sister, Katie Rickon Benson, filed a lawsuit suing Corey in civil court on behalf of the living trust and the estate of Eric Rickens and was asking for $13 million. That case states that Corey is responsible for the death of Eric and should not have profited from his death. Also, Corey had stolen property from the estate, including money from a safe, vehicles that had belonged to Eric, and some off-road vehicles. The civil case also includes the book that Corey wrote, saying it is an unlawful book and that she used Eric's name and likeness without permission for the book. Eric's family has also stated that they believe Corey is the only one who could have killed Eric, and he had no history of drugs. Corey herself also said that he didn't do drugs. Corey seems to have calculated how to kill her husband and worked hard to profit from his death. For the murder charge alone, Corey faces 25 to life in prison if convicted. Corey has maintained her innocence during every stage of this investigation. So far, Corey has not been found guilty, and no trial date has been set yet, but it will likely be in 2024. The criminal and civil trial are still ongoing and are currently being investigated. If you would like me to cover this case moving forward or the trial to come, let me know down below. Today, our story repeats the biblical story of the first crime on earth. As the book of Genesis states, and Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. This occurred after Cain had sacrificed to the Almighty the fruits of the earth and Abel the firstborn lambs. To the disappointment of the older man, God accepted the younger man's sacrifice and rejected his gifts. Driven by selfish jealousy, Cain called Abel to the field and there took his life. But unfortunately, even in the modern world, because of unhealthy jealousy, the older brother can kill the younger one. The June 2010 was very difficult for the family of Donna and Samuel Eckerd. Their 19-year-old son, Sean, was missing. The night before, Sean had a fight with his older brother, Stanley, and left the house slamming the door. Sean had never previously allowed himself to leave the house for long periods of time without his phone or informing his mother. Late that night, the whole family was alarmed by the young man's disappearance. But officially, the search for the boy began only 24 hours later. Missing person notices with photos of smiling blonde-haired Sean were posted at all stations in supermarkets and along the streets. But even after 2 days of searching, there were no results. The police had their hands up in the air as they continued their search. For more than 2 days, Sean Paul Eckerd was officially missing. Relatives, acquaintances, and a few friends gathered a team of activists who day and night combed local establishments, interviewed random passersby, and minute by minute reconstructed the route of the guy that night. The police, without stopping the search, began to look more closely into the habits and rhythm of the Eckerd family to reconstruct the sequence of events leading up to Sean's disappearance. Donna and Samuel Eckerd married with a history of family relationships. They had 6 adult children from previous marriages. After experiencing difficulties and setbacks in their early unions, they found their safe haven in each other's company and settled in San Diego, California. They rented a large, good-sized family home and attended the local church on weekends without fail. The family was devout and lived a quiet and unsociable lifestyle. A few years after the family moved in, they had a son, Stanley, and 2 years later a second son, Sean. Donna devoted herself fully to the home and raising her sons. So the brothers grew up in love and care. They both attended a good local school. And on weekends without fail, the whole family participated in church activities. The eldest children, having reached adulthood, flew away from their parents' nest all over the continent to start their own families. But the Ackett family was friendly. They kept in touch with each other, regularly called each other, and spent all family holidays together. Sean was a simple and fun-loving boy. He had a bright appearance, charisma, and insight that attracted people to him like a magnet. He knew how to listen and empathize, so he made friends very easily. Stanley, on the contrary, had a more reserved character and was wary of everything new. He was shy, so socializing with people was much more difficult for him than for his brother. They had one common group of friends and classmates despite the age difference. Together, the brothers were like one, helping each other and always looking out for each other. The boys grew up well-mannered and studied very well. They always had a trusting and friendly relationship with each other. Small jokes about each other were accepted with humor by their parents. Respect was valued above all else in the family. Donna and Samuel raised their children from childhood with faith in God and according to God's laws. The life of the Ackett family flowed in its own way. As the brothers grew up, their interests unnoticeably became completely opposite. The youngest, Sean, played in the music band, and the eldest, Stanley, became interested in martial art. The life of each young boy was filled with vivid impressions and emotions, which they shared with the family in the evenings. Sean was always first. His stories about music, friends, and upcoming plans took up most of the evening time. When the family gathered before dinner and shared the emotions of the day, everyone listened to Sean. There was no time for Stanley, nor it seemed to him was there much to share. No grandiose plans for the future, no exciting stories, not even stories of friends to draw attention to. So Stanley humbly listened to his brother's stories. On one such evening, Sean told his family that he had met a neighbor girl, Mary Jane. A fragile young girl with bright brown eyes and long blonde hair put Sean in a daze. Through the open window of the house where the girl lived, he heard a magical piano playing. As if mesmerized, he went to the captivating sounds of music and entered the house without knocking. Self-confidence in his own charm allowed Sean to get out of such a funny situation with dignity and cleverly met the girl he liked. She was a few years older than Sean, but this did not prevent them from maintaining a friendly relationship. The soul of the company, Sean often organized picnics where Mary Jane was invited. They walked a lot, visited parks and observation decks. The budding adolescent love affair was interrupted by the unfair reality of the adult world. The Ackett family received the sad news of the illness of Dame's elderly mother, Sean and Stanley's grandmother. In search of prosperity, parents tried to take into account the interests of each member of the family, but the decision made fundamentally changes the life of the whole family. Sean did not want to leave his native land, his friends, and his Mary Jane, but the parents' decision had already been made. The Acketts leave the city where their children were born and raised and move to another state. So in February 2005, as fate would have it, the Ackett family settles in the house of Donna's mother in the small town of Spring Hill in Florida, where they begin a new life. The move was like a breath of fresh air for the whole family because the decision was the right one. Sean and Stanley's grandmother was on the mend. Sean's heart was broken. He missed his band in which he played, his walks with Mary Jane and hangouts in his favorite city. But it is impossible for life-loving Sean to be sad for long. And after a while, a new life becomes as full as the one he missed. Donna and Samuel safely got a job at the Presbyterian church where they were almost all their time. Donna took care of the children in the nursery, and Samuel helped with the chapel. Over the course of time, the brothers grow close again and make new acquaintances together again at school. Old life seems to be resurrected in a new place. Sean plays in the school band again. Stanley attends a martial arts school that is only a couple blocks from their new home. Despite this new busy life, Sean can't stop thinking about Mary Jane. Every night after class, he locks himself in his room and they talk on the phone for hours. The goodbyes are in the same way, with Sean saying he dreams of meeting again. Each time he promises that after getting his parents' permission, he will definitely come to see her. Whereas the younger brother grew and kept his first love in his heart, the elder Stanley tried to establish himself in the family in his own way. Quiet and calm Stanley, by virtue of his stiffness and modesty, seemed to be deprived of parental warmth and attention. In pursuit of self-expression, he makes a series of bad decisions that will have dire consequences for the entire family. In May 2006, he informs his parents that he intends to drop out of school and devote his life to studying martial arts and creating a martial arts club. But youthful maximalism leads the guy into a bad company where he begins to engage in petty fraud and try illegal drugs. In February 2007, dysfunctional connections eventually led Stanley to arrest. He was caught stealing and charged with felony fraud-related offenses. The news of the elder son's shenanigans deals the first heavy blow to Donna. She ends up in the hospital with a heart attack, but the situation is quickly resolved with the help of a lawyer hired by Jennifer's sister. He skillfully defends Stanley, proving the lack of direct evidence, which allows the guy to quickly go free, receiving only a suspended sentence. This episode greatly frightens Stanley. He feels guilty and closes himself off in the hope of being understood and accepted by his family. Having survived the frightening events that happened to Stanley, Sean does not say anything to his parents about his decisions. During his summer vacation, he takes a job as a waiter. Having saved up some money, he leaves only a note for his mother to go to California to marry Jane. The long 2-day bus ride to his beloved seemed like an eternity. The scenery changed outside the window. The day changed to night, and Sean imagined how at the final station he would see her, his Mary Jane. The driver announced the final stop and the bus stopped. Sean was ready to run to her, for he had already seen her happy face through the window and her long hair, which she was tucking behind her ears with her fingers. They had spent some of their happiest days together. They'd had picnics just like they'd had in his best high school days. Sean had confessed his love to Mary for the first time, and it was mutual. After another walk, the young people sat down on a bench. Sean felt faint. His eyes went black. He fell unconscious. Sean ended up in the hospital. The young boy was fading away like a match in a matter of days. Mary Jane contacted Sean's sister. Jennifer urgently flew to California. Doctors diagnosed the cause of such a rapid fading of a strong and sturdy guy. Tick-borne encephalitis begins suddenly and very quickly causes complications of various kinds up to inflammation of the brain. A difficult struggle for Sean's life and health began. Doctors fought for the boy's life for a long time. More than a month of coma and 6 months of rehabilitation helped him to return from the other side of the world. Sean had a very hard time recovering for a long time. An ordinary tick bite on a summer walk turned out to be a serious injury for him. Jennifer took her brother back to Florida where he faced therapy and a long recovery. Mary Jane was left to wait. Again, the only source of communication for the lovers was the telephone. A series of troubles and unexpected illnesses brought the Eckert family together. Donna does everything impossible to completely rid her beloved son Sean from the consequences of a serious illness. She carefully monitors his diet and exercise. Such attentive care leads to a full recovery of Sean and to Stanley's inner resentment and jealousy, which he nurtures in bits and pieces. After a while, Sean regained his strength and returned to his studies in music. In February 2009, he finishes his studies and dreams of going to his Mary Jane to return together and introduce her to his parents as his favorite. But Sean's plans are not destined to come true. Stanley introduces his brother to his dream girl, Samantha Rowe. Samantha, a native of Florida, quickly found a common language with the two brothers. Stanley was in love and sympathized with her, but the girl was impressed by the cheerful and sociable Sean. For some time, Stanley actively courts Samantha, and she accepts his signs of attention. Several romantic meetings end with a passionate kiss. Stanley is immensely happy, but Samantha, who said yes to her older brother, is still thinking about her younger brother. Samantha decides to write a message to Sean in which she confesses her sympathy for him and invites him for a walk around the city. The guy agrees, and they spend the evening walking along the waterfront and talking about Stanley and Mary Jane. Sean does not seek to win the girl after all. He has long belonged to another. A rejected Samantha writes a message to Stanley and tells him that Sean has been seeing her and confesses that he really likes her too. Stanley was furious. That same evening, he went up to his brother's room where they had a conversation. At first, the brothers talked quietly, then their words turned into shouts, and then there was dead silence. The parents were at home, but the brothers sometimes clarified relations quite loudly, so they did not see anything special in what had happened. Mom was the first to realize Sean was missing. He hadn't returned her calls. Recalling the evening before, she got Stanley's explanation that Sean had left home after an argument. After 2 days of searching, the police received a frightening call. The caller was Sean's sister, Jennifer. The dispatcher who took the call heard only a woman scream in the receiver. A piercing male moan could be heard in the background. After repeated requests to calm down, The dispatcher finally records the request for help. Jennifer continues to scream. She pleads for help and reports, "Oh damn it. My brother Stanley killed Sean. He's in the house talking to his mother. His father is freaking lying over his dead son who's been buried in the ground since early Saturday morning. Damn it. I'm begging for help." Police officers arriving at the scene of the tragedy observed a horrifying scene. In the backyard of the house, Samuel was kneeling on his knees, 2 hands dripping earth. He was pulling his son's body out of the damp earth, screaming and trying to wipe the earth off Sean. In an instant, a quiet neighborhood filled with sculpted lawns, where the 2 young brothers often waved to neighbors, turned into the scene of a violent tragedy. And now the Eckerd family, who once raised 2 sons, are left with the horrifying memory of digging in the ground only to find one of their sons and watching the other son being handcuffed and taken away. Stanley Eckerd was detained on suspicion of premeditated murder. At his first interrogation, he revealed that he had no intention of killing his brother. In a moment of anger, he struck Sean on the head. The resulting injury caused Sean to fall. Stanley checked his pulse. Realizing that his younger brother was dead, he tied up the body and carried it out the window to bury it on the lawn behind the house. Stanley's words at the inquest, "I buried him. After all, that's what you do with dead people." These words sound like the cold-blooded calculation of a serial killer, not a loving brother. In his defense, Stanley Eckerd said he did it for his mother. He wanted to protect her from the shock she might have received at the news. Afterward, Stanley planned to move his brother's body to rebury it once his parents were gone. Stanley's behavior during the interrogation varied. He cried and confessed what he had done and was obviously sorry, presenting it as an accident, or he blamed Sean with hatred in his eyes. Stanley spoke very harshly and unpleasantly about his younger brother. He called him guilty for all his troubles and admitted that he had won the rivalry for his mother's and Samantha's love. That same day, Stanley was charged with second-degree murder and taken into custody without bail. 2 days later, Dr. Barbara Wolf performed an autopsy on Sean's body. She presented to the court the results of the forensic examination, which indicated that the victim's neck showed bruising under the skin, and rope marks were present, indicating that the neck had been compressed to make breathing difficult. The examination concluded that the death was the result of an inflicted head injury and asphyxiation. Assistant State Attorney Pete Magrino proceeded to scrutinize the case. On February 25, 2011, the first hearing began, presided over by District Judge Stephen Rushing. On the second row were Stanley's parents, Donna and Samuel Eckerd. They wept as they watched their oldest son being led into the courtroom under escort. On April 9, 2013, the trial began in Hernando Court, presided over by District Judge Anthony Taddy. The defense was led by attorney Alan Hunter, while prosecutor Pete remained on the prosecution side. The main goal of the prosecution was to convince the jury that Stanley had carefully planned the crime. Defense attorney Alan stated that there was a spontaneous fight that led to the tragic outcome. In closing, Alan appealed to the jury to take note of Stanley's attempt to cover up the crime in the name of good intentions. Stanley Eckerd was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and faced a mandatory life sentence if convicted of that charge. Sentencing was scheduled for May 13th. Stanley's fate was in the hands of District Judge Anthony Taddy, who presided over the 5-day trial. Second-degree murder is punishable by up to life in prison. Stanley Elias Eckerd always said he never intended to kill his brother 3 years ago before burying him in the front yard of the house. Before trial, Eckerd rejected an offer from prosecutors to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for limiting his prison sentence to 20 years. Eckerd remained stone-faced as the clerk read the verdict. The brothers' parents, Samuel and Donna, wept quietly. As the jury left the courtroom, Samuel Eckerd's sobs turned to screams, and numerous relatives gathered around Donna and Samuel. The jury agreed that Eckerd did not plan to kill 19-year-old Sean, but the jury did not completely absolve him of guilt. After deliberating for about 2.5 hours, 9 women and 3 men found Eckerd guilty of second-degree murder. All the while, the Eckerds said they believed Stanley's account of what happened in the early morning hours of June 19, 2010 and criticized the state attorney's office for filing the charges. Later Friday, Samuel Eckerd said Chief Assistant Public Defender Alan Lanter did an excellent job. The family questioned the appropriateness of the sentence. They filed an appeal to appeal the verdict but were denied. I really can't understand how the jury reached a verdict of second-degree murder in about 2 hours, Samuel Eckerd said. Despite that, our faith was not shaken, he said. One fact was not disputed during the trial. After his brother's death, Stanley pulled his body out of Sean's bedroom window and buried it in a shallow grave in the backyard of the family's Spring Hill home. Samuel Eckert found Sean's body 2 days later. Assistant State's Attorney Pete Magrino began his closing arguments at trial by showing jurors photos of Sean's dirt-covered body lying in a fetal position in the hole. "This is not a detective novel case," Magrino said. He noted that Stanley, when questioned by detectives on the day his brother's body was found, changed his testimony as many as 6 times, saying he initially knew nothing about Sean's death. For 2 days after his brother's funeral, according to Magrino, Stanley sent messages from Sean's cell phone to family members saying that Sean had allegedly gone to California to stay with his girlfriend, Mary Jane. Also on behalf of Sean, he corresponded with Samantha saying that he did not want to communicate and she should pay attention to Stanley. After hours of questioning, Stanley said that Sean had died during a struggle in the bedroom that morning. He claimed he heard a snap in his brother's neck as they fell to the floor. He then hid Sean's body to protect his mother, Donna, who has a weak heart. He said he planned to tell his father after his mother left on a trip. "Those injuries that the defendant inflicted with his hands constitute murder," Magrino said, and he also called attention to testimony and Stanley's statements to detectives about rising tensions over Samantha Rowe. He also called attention to testimony about a conversation Stanley had with his brother and a friend about revenge in the weeks before Sean's death. In that conversation, the friend testified Stanley said that if he was going to kill someone, he would hit the person in the back of the head and bury the body in the yard. That evidence was tenuous at best and could not dispel reasonable doubt, Alan Lanter told the jury. "A crime involves an act with an intended result," Lanter said. "Yes, he was involved in his brother's death, but he didn't kill his brother." Lanter pointed to testimony from a forensic pathologist who said the blow to the head combined with other factors, Sean's high blood alcohol content and possible lingering brain swelling due to encephalitis likely led to his death. The pathologist also testified that hitting his head on the bedroom nightstand when the 2 men fell could have been enough to kill Sean. Lanter reminded the jury of the testimony of Donna Eckert, who said that Sean suffered from severe mood swings after suffering from encephalitis. At one point in her testimony, Donna Eckert called Sean's death an accident. The jury also could have found Stanley Eckert guilty of third-degree murder or manslaughter. Calling the case a pardonable homicide, Lanter asked jurors not to let gruesome photos of Sean's body and Stanley's poor decision to bury him in the yard distract them from what led to his death. "Stanley Eckert did something horrible after Sean died," said Lanter, "but he's not a murderer." During the final sentencing, excitement gripped the Eckert parents. Judge Anthony imposed a sentence of 50 years in prison without parole. The parents were broken. One miserable day had taken 2 sons from them at once. The cold-blooded murder of an innocent man and even a brother is clearly beyond the bounds of adequate human response. In the biblical story, the brother-killer Cain was banished from paradise as punishment. But he solved the problem differently, eliminating the source of his remorse. The case of Pamela Buckbinder. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family in Miami, Florida. As the 3rd child in the family, he received a lot of love from his parents. They realized that he was different from his peers. However, at the age of 5, Jacob was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his family noticed that he was experiencing significant mood swings. Despite this, he was doing well in school. He created an educational smartphone app and won a competition in Miami. However, a month later, Jacob couldn't get out of bed, had no motivation to do anything, even stand up. They finally brought him to a doctor who diagnosed him with depression and anxiety. At 17, Jacob expressed that he no longer wanted to live. His parents noticed his unstable behavior and mental state, prompting them to take him to a hospital where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness involves extreme mood swings ranging from depression to emotional outbursts. Those affected feel trapped in their own thoughts. After finishing high school, Jacob enrolled in college while continuing his treatment. Throughout this time, he saw various psychiatrists who prescribed increasingly stronger medications. From the ages of 17 to 20, Jacob underwent numerous treatment courses, took 5 to 6 pills daily, and tried around 30 different medications, yet none seemed to help. By 2012, at 21 years old, Jacob was still deteriorating. His parents were deeply concerned and unsure of what steps to take next. Then, one day, a relative from New York, Pamela Buckbinder, called with an offer of help. Jacob's parents were relieved, thinking they had gotten help. However, They had no idea of the challenges that were about to come to their family. Pamela, a 43-year-old psychotherapist, lives in Chelsea, Manhattan, with her 4-year-old son, Calder. She and Jacob Nolan are cousins with a 22-year age gap. Jacob was the godfather of her son. In 2012, Pamela offered to help Jacob by inviting him to move from Florida to her apartment. While living with her, she provided him with therapy sessions and prescribed medication. In exchange for her help, Jacob took responsibility for Calder's care. Jacob trusted her completely. In one photo, Jacob is seen lying in bed with Pamela, laughing, which shows he feels comfortable and at home with her. However, it's important to note that this relationship is not just familial. Pamela is also Jacob's psychotherapist. Jacob cared deeply for Calder and treated him like a son. He wanted to set a positive example for his godson of what a real man should be like. This approach seemed to work as Jacob, who had struggled with mental illness for years, seemed to be stabilizing, joking frequently and always smiling. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, Pamela began to frequently express her frustrations with her ex-partner, Michael Weiss. Calder's father, Pamela, ended her relationship with Michael shortly after the birth of her son. Michael Weiss, 38, is a psychotherapist. On the surface, he and Pamela appear to be a happy, loving couple. However, beneath the perfect exterior, their relationship is in trouble. Both Michael and Pamela have reported domestic violence to the police. Pamela once attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass. Michael received medical treatment, stitched up the wound, and later that day, he reported the incident to the police. As a result, Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, she was soon forgiven by Michael and the couple reconciled. But a few months later, Pamela went to the police again, claiming that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. She later retracted that statement. Although they were never officially married, Michael and Pamela's relationship lasted about 4 years. After they had a son in 2008, Pamela finally ended the relationship. Their tumultuous relationship ended, but a new conflict arose, the custody battle for their son, Calder. Every day, Pamela tells Jacob about Michael in insulting words. She complained that Michael refused to pay child support and even accused him of doing bad things to their son, Calder, during his visits. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob was awakened by Pamela's gentle touch. She climbed into his bed, caressed his back, and whispered sweet nothings in his ear. She told him that Jacob was her savior. He was the best person in the world because no one understood her like he did. However, her affectionate mood quickly changed. She took a black sports bag from her closet and stuffed it with a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began to cry and told Jacob that today was the day he needed to face Michael. A diagram showing the entrance to the multi-story office building where Michael is seeing patients is written on a piece of paper. Jacob stands up, grabs his bag, stuffs the diagram into his pocket, and leaves. Before leaving, he washes his face and declares, "Today is the day our lives will change for the better because Michael will be eliminated." Jacob arrived at the right high-rise in Manhattan. He circled the building, observing it from different angles. Entering through the service entrance, he checked in on the first floor, provided his real name, and mentioned he was going to the tutoring center. He was allowed inside. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and made his way to Michael's office. He heard a patient inside and decided to wait in the hallway for the appointment to finish. Soon, the patient would exit, leaving Michael alone. While waiting, Jacob felt increasingly anxious. Doubts flooded his mind, making him question whether he was making the right decisions. At one point, he thought about abandoning everything and running home. However, the idea of returning to Pamela without completing her request and disappointing her was stronger than his fear. Jacob realized he had no choice but to continue. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and informed Michael that Pamela had asked him to collect financial documents for the Calders' kindergarten. As Michael searched for the documents, Jacob asked to use the restroom. In the restroom, Jacob took out a knife and hid it in his pocket, then retrieved a large hammer. He exited the bathroom and approached Michael, swinging the hammer at him. Thankfully, Michael reacted quickly, ducking just in time to avoid a serious injury, though the hammer struck his shoulder. Jacob then pulled out the knife and a struggle ensued. Michael, being physically larger, quickly fought back. The people around heard Michael's cry for help. They mistakenly thought that the doctor was being attacked by an unstable mental patient. They quickly called 911 to report the incident. Before the police arrived, Jacob and Michael, feeling exhausted, sat down in the hallway. Jacob took out his phone and took a selfie, which he sent to Pamela along with a question about what he should do next. But he never received a reply. The situation made him feel very strange. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. The injured men were rushed to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, none of them had life-threatening injuries. Michael was treated and sent home the same day. Jacob's injuries were more serious, and the doctors noted that he was unstable. Jacob was arrested in the hospital while he was receiving treatment. He sent a detailed message to Pamela about what had happened to him and Michael. Although she initially ignored his message, she eventually asked which hospital he was in. When Pamela arrived, she was not allowed to see Jacob, who was already handcuffed to the bed. Jacob spent 4 days in the hospital before being taken to a jail cell after his discharge. He was released on bail of $200,000 while awaiting trial. Jacob was permitted to fly from New York to his parents' home in Florida. Several weeks after the incident, Michael filed a lawsuit against Pamela, accusing her of conspiring to kill him. Michael argued that Pamela was dangerous and insisted that their son should live with him. He presented surveillance footage from a hardware store showing that the day before the attack, Pamela and Jacob had purchased a hammer together and Pamela had paid in cash. Pamela denied any involvement, saying that she had only asked Jacob to retrieve some financial documents from Michael, but had not asked Jacob to attack. Although she admitted to giving Jacob a knife, she explained that it was to protect her son Calder, since Calder's daycare was on the first floor of the building where Michael worked. Shortly thereafter, the judge transferred custody of Calder to Michael Weiss, granting him full custody and banning Pamela from contacting her son for 5 years. A few months after the incident, Jacob accused Pamela of orchestrating the attack on Michael. He claimed that Pamela meticulously planned the attack, and that she had instructed Jacob to approach Michael and hit him with a hammer. Jacob previously said that Pamela had been psychologically manipulating him. Pamela repeatedly told him that Michael was harming her son, but there was no evidence to support her claim. No one ever witnessed Michael harming Calder or saying anything negative to his son. In fact, relatives testified that Michael cared deeply for his son. Pamela was someone Jacob trusted completely and considered very close. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents were in despair. They fully supported their son and claimed that Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed that Pamela had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. Prosecutors described Jacob as a spoiled child from a wealthy family, noting that he provided 3 inconsistent accounts of the event and appeared confused. When the police first arrived at Michael's office, Jacob pointed at Michael and accused him of attacking Jacob with a knife. However, during questioning, Jacob claimed that he had never used a hammer in Michael's office. He explained that he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Michael. In his third statement, Jacob said that Michael had attacked him first. Prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence regarding the motive behind the attack on Michael. Just before the attack, Michael had purchased a $1.5 million life insurance policy, naming his son Calder as the beneficiary. However, 3 days before the attack on November 9, 2012, Michael had agreed to add Pamela as a co-beneficiary and allow her to manage Calder's money. Jacob claimed that this was the first time he had learned about the insurance policy and claimed that Pamela had never shared her financial affairs with him. During the trial, it was revealed that Jacob had purchased plastic zip ties from a hardware store in addition to the hammer found with Pamela. Jacob confirmed this and made a shocking admission. Pamela had asked him not only to kill Michael, but also to ensure he suffered before dying. She described brutal acts that Jacob was supposed to carry out. Jacob refused to inflict such extreme cruelty, but he agreed to kill Michael. Jacob mentioned that Pamela initially wanted to create a homemade weapon using an air pistol, but when they got to the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and more effective to use a hammer instead. Jacob Best's attorney focused on proving that Jacob was insane. However, proving that he was insane is quite difficult. Currently, there is no test that can reveal a person's thoughts and feelings at the time of the crime. Evaluations are usually based on interviews, police reports, medical records, and sometimes social media messages. Often, 2 different psychiatrists can give conflicting opinions, which can confuse judges and juries. Although mental illness can affect emotions, thoughts, and behavior, throughout the trial, Jacob clearly understood his actions and admitted that they were wrong and bad. He did not appear insane in court. He was handsome, articulate, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly. Pamela was not called to testify at the trial by either the prosecution or the defense. Jacob Nolan, who had a mental disorder, faced skepticism regarding his claim that Pamela was the one who initiated the attack. Before the trial, Jacob, thus lawyers hired detectives to locate Pamela, but they were unable to find her and her apartment was empty. In March 2016, after a 2-week trial, 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was convicted of attempted murder and second-degree assault, receiving a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Jacob was very upset about his sentence, stating, "It's unfair. I'm not a danger to society." His parents regretted their decision to send him to live with their Pamela, believing it was their biggest mistake. On October 19, 2017, nearly 5 years after Michael's attack, police located Pamela in Sullivan, New York. The Manhattan District Attorney charged her with conspiracy to murder Michael Weiss. At the time of Pamela's arrest, police found her passport in Calder's birth certificate. Pamela was arrested and maintained her innocence. She hired 2 of New York's top attorneys, who claimed that the video showing her doing laundry and the video of her buying the hammer had been edited. They claimed that Pamela was a highly educated psychotherapist and would never have considered organizing a murder. In the 5 years after Jacob's, Pamela lived a normal life. She worked and rented an apartment. She did not attempt to go into hiding or flee the country, but she avoided reporters and did not comment on Jacob's crimes. Pamela was detained before her trial at the notorious Rikers Island prison in New York, where she spent 5 years due to legal issues. On September 7, 2022, during a pre-trial hearing, Pamela made a statement agreeing to plead guilty in return for a lighter sentence. However, a month later, she decided to withdraw her plea. Pamela's trial took place. The jury found Pamela Buckbinder guilty, and she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was read, she looked sadly at her relative, who blew her kisses. Jacob and Pamela are currently serving their sentences in separate correctional facilities in New York. Jacob is scheduled to be released in 2024, while Pamela will be released in 2027. Jacob maintains regular phone contact with his parents. He has expressed remorse for his actions and reflects on them every night. He even wishes to meet Michael Weiss in person to apologize and seek forgiveness. When Pamela is released, her son, Calder, will be 19. He is currently being raised by his biological father, Michael, who still works in Manhattan.